I want to thank every person that prayed, every person that felt with us, every person.
Everything is far from fine with Bill Cosby. From being America's national father, a cultural icon once revered by millions of families, he now only appears in grim headlines, lawsuits, trials, mounting accusations. The internet once elevated his name to legendary status, but it was also the internet that dragged him down, turning him into a symbol of betrayal. Can a man in his 80s, blind and financially drained, still rise against the wave of civil lawsuits surrounding him? Can decades of glory be enough to overshadow the ever-growing list of accusations? And when the world no longer looks at him with admiration, but with contempt, can Bill Cosby salvage what is called his legacy? Or has it all been forever buried under the shadow of the scandal that once blew up the internet? He once ascended to the pinnacle of fame, only to fall to the depths of rejection. But every tragedy has its beginning. Today's dark days did not appear out of nowhere. They were sown from a seemingly small moment in the past. Before social media erupted, before Me Too shook Hollywood, there was one woman who quietly stepped forward. A case deemed insufficient evidence then sank into silence. A file sealed for years, believed to be forever forgotten. It was there that the seed of an earthquake was planted, and it bore the name Andrea Constand 2005. The first crack, the Andrea Constand case. 2005. In 2005, a name emerged that opened the first crack in the seemingly unshakable wall, called Bill Cosby Andrea Constand. At that time, she was an employee at Temple University, where Cosby had once served as a public face and source of pride. What seemed like a minor internal complaint suddenly became the biggest question mark in the career of a man America regarded as an icon. Constand testified that in 2004, Cosby invited her to his home, gave her pills that made her body go limp, and then took advantage of her in an unconscious state. When the incident came to light, Montgomery County District Attorney Bruce Castor faced a difficult decision: should he pursue criminal charges or not. After weeks of investigation, he made a controversial choice: not to prosecute criminally, citing insufficient evidence to secure a conviction in court. This decision later became the focal point of debate for an entire decade. But the story did not end there. Andrea Constand filed a civil lawsuit, and for the first time, Bill Cosby was forced to testify under oath. Over 1,000 pages of depositions were recorded. Within those documents, Cosby admitted to a shocking detail: he had used Quaaludes, a powerful sedative, to give to women before having relations. Although Cosby continued to deny coercion, this admission was enough to fracture the flawless image he had built for decades. To avoid a public trial that could ignite public outrage, the two sides reached a settlement out of court. Constand received a compensation payment, the amount undisclosed at the time, later reported by many sources to be in the millions of dollars. In return, Cosby did not go to trial, and the entire case file was sealed. The public knew nothing. The press reported it only faintly, treating the matter as a dispute that had already been resolved. Yet the very documents buried away became a time bomb. More than a decade later, as the wave of accusations against Cosby surged, journalists and lawyers succeeded in getting the court to unseal them. And then, line by line, Cosby's own words came back to haunt him, becoming key evidence to reopen the criminal case in 2015. Looking back, 2005 was like a crossroads where Cosby narrowly escaped. He paid, stayed silent, then returned to the stage, continuing tours with cheering audiences. The public forgot quickly. Hollywood forgot quickly. But the crack remained. And once a crack exists, a wall may still stand, but with a large enough tremor, it will all collapse. Andrea Constand, the woman who patiently waited for justice in silence, later became the central figure of the entire scandal. Her accusation, once brushed aside, was the seed that turned Bill Cosby's career upside down. And from this case, a clear lesson echoes: the truth can be buried, but it does not disappear. It only waits for the right moment to return strong enough to shatter an empire. The explosion of 2014, when the name Bill Cosby blew up the internet. For nearly a decade, everything had been quiet. The Andrea Constand case seemed like nothing more than a sealed file tucked away in a courthouse drawer. Cosby continued to tour, sign contracts, smile for the cameras, and the audience still cheered. But in 2014, a single spark ignited the biggest explosion of his life. one not on stage, but on the internet. It happened during a stand-up show in Philadelphia. Comedian Hannibal Buress, while making jokes, dropped a cutting challenge: Google Bill Cosby rape. The short, sharp line pierced straight through the facade Cosby had carefully maintained. The clip spread like wildfire. Within days, from YouTube to Twitter, from small blogs to major newspapers, Bill Cosby's name erupted again. But this time, not in laughter, rather in whispers, murmurs, and finally a wave of suspicion. And then the unthinkable happened. Women who had remained silent for decades began to speak out together. One by one, their stories followed the same grim pattern: Cosby Fame Trust and drugs. Former supermodel Janice Dickinson, a global icon of the 1980s, recounted her dark memory. Joan Tarshis, a former PR worker, also claimed Cosby had taken advantage of her. Each testimony was another hammer strike against the image once revered by the entire nation. International media took over. Major outlets like the New York Times, The Guardian, and CNN reported relentlessly. On television, anchors read headlines with disbelief: Bill Cosby, America's dad, allegations. The more voices came forward, the more the public uproar grew. On Twitter, the hashtag #Cosby flooded timelines, generating millions of comments, shares, and debates. The online world became a public courtroom where the image of America's dad was torn apart before millions of eyes. Netflix, which had scheduled a special comedy program with Cosby for November 2014, immediately postponed it indefinitely. NBC only weeks later canceled its plan for a new sitcom starring him. TV Land removed all reruns of The Cosby Show from its schedule. Cosby's presence vanished from screens almost overnight. But this disappearance was not in silence. It was drowned out by the deafening noise of media and social networks. Cosby's name was pulled down from the Hall of Fame and hurled into a darkness from which he could not escape. Old fans were left confused, many feeling betrayed. Some colleagues at first tried to defend him, but as the list of accusers grew, the tidal wave of outrage swept everything away. If the Andrea Constant case in 2005 was the seed, then 2014 was the storm. The internet became the catalyst, transforming whispers into screams, forcing both Hollywood and American society to confront the question: had America's dad really hidden a terrible secret for decades? The answer remained unclear, but one thing was certain. From that moment, Bill Cosby was no longer the untouchable legend. He became the center of a scandal that blew up the internet, where the truth began to surface and the world could no longer look away. The immediate fallout: when Hollywood turned its back. Within just weeks after the storm of accusations erupted, an entire television empire built around the name Bill Cosby collapsed like a domino effect. What had taken decades to build was swept away in a single 24-hour news cycle. On November 18, 2014, Netflix announced the postponement of Bill Cosby 77, a comedy special already filmed and set to premiere on Thanksgiving. The very next day, NBC canceled a new sitcom in development that would have seen Cosby return as the typical father figure on primetime television. At the same time, TV Land erased The Cosby Show from its schedule and website. In just 2 days, 3 entertainment giants turned their backs. It was not merely a reaction to public pressure, but a recognition that no one dared gamble on a shattered image. Prestigious institutions also swiftly cut ties. The U.S. Navy rescinded an honorary title it had once bestowed. Temple University, Cosby's alma mater and the place where the Andrea Constant case originated, forced him to resign from its board of trustees. More than 20 other universities, one by one, stripped him of honorary doctorates, a rare move that underscored the gravity of the crisis. From a man once celebrated, Cosby became a name no one wanted to be associated with. Advertising deals, performance contracts, talk show invitations, all vanished. Statues and stars of fame once erected in his honor became targets of outrage, defaced, crossed out, turned into symbols of betrayal. On social media, the phrase "America's dad" was flipped into "America's predator." Former fans were stunned, many admitting they felt as if their childhood had been betrayed. Actors who had once stood beside Cosby on set also found themselves in a difficult position, remained silent, and risked being seen as complicit, or speak out and cut ties with the man who had once supported them. But perhaps the greatest shock was not in Hollywood, but among the public itself. Americans had long believed Bill Cosby was the model father, the symbol of the ideal black family on television. Now suddenly, they were forced to confront the reality that such an icon might have concealed a horrifying darkness for decades. From 2014 onward, Bill Cosby's name no longer appeared on the list of television legends, but instead on the list of disgraced artists. It was an immediate shift, as sudden as a lightning strike signaling that his life had entered a stage with no return. And a bigger question began to echo. If just one joke from Hannibal Buress could trigger such a wave of accusations and an instant downfall, then perhaps what the public didn't yet know was far more terrifying. The case reopened. By the end of 2014, the storm of public outrage had not yet subsided when another bombshell exploded. But this time it didn't come from the stage, nor from new accusations, but from documents once thought to be buried deep in the drawers of the justice system. In July 2015, at the request of the Associated Press, a federal court unsealed Bill Cosby's deposition from the civil lawsuit with Andrea Constant nearly a decade earlier. For the first time, the public could read more than 1,000 pages of testimony. And in those pages, Cosby admitted something undeniable: he had purchased and used Quaaludes, a powerful sedative, to give to women before having sex. He even recounted giving the drug to a dancer in Las Vegas, and that on more than one occasion, he would offer pills to gain an advantage. These documents changed everything. It was no longer about rumors or suspicions. This was Cosby's own words, signed and sworn under oath. The image of America's dad crumbled once again. But this time the collapse didn't come from outside accusations. It came from his own voice in the deposition room. That same year, Kevin Steele, an ambitious candidate for Montgomery County District Attorney in Pennsylvania, entered the scene. He made a bold campaign promise. If elected, he would reopen the Bill Cosby case. To many, it seemed like a political tactic. But Steele won. And true to his word, at the end of 2015, just days before the 12-year statute of limitations expired, he officially charged Bill Cosby with 3 serious counts related to the Constant case. On December 30, 2015, images of a 78-year-old Cosby walking into court spread across global media. Dressed in a brown sweater, his face silent and expressionless, the man, once a television legend, now appeared as a criminal defendant. The scene shocked not only America, but the entire world. Cosby had to post a $1 million bail to remain free. Outside reporters crowded for every shot while the public followed his every step. A once untouchable icon was cornered at the very end of the year. His defense lawyers struck back immediately. They argued Cosby had only confessed in 2005 because he believed he had been promised immunity from criminal prosecution. They accused prosecutors of playing dirty, using sealed documents against their client. They tried to paint Cosby as a man trapped in a legal ambush, betrayed by a justice system that had broken its word. But the public no longer had patience for such defenses. On social media, outrage surged. To the people, seeing the man who once brought laughter to millions of families now standing trial was proof that justice had finally arrived. His own confession in his own voice, the press emphasized. While audiences nodded, there was no turning back. From 2015 onward, everything had changed. If 2014 marked his downfall in the eyes of the media and the public, then by the end of 2015, the legal noose had tightened. It was no longer just a scandal in the headlines. It was now a battle with justice itself. Bill Cosby, America's dad, was officially charged. And the question echoed everywhere. Would one of television's greatest icons finally pay for the deeds he had hidden in the dark for decades? No one knew the answer at that moment, but the world was watching. And the trials that followed, from the failed prosecution in 2017 to the conviction in 2018, opened the most dramatic chapter in his entire downfall. The historic trial, from the 2017 mistrial to the 2018 conviction. No one could have imagined that one day Bill Cosby, once at the very peak of American popular culture, would sit in the defendant's chair listening as charges were read against him. In 2017, 2 years after being indicted, the world followed his first trial. And that was only the prelude to a fierce legal battle stretching into 2018, where Cosby was finally convicted and entered history in a way he never wanted. In June 2017, the first criminal trial against Bill Cosby took place in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. At 79, the defendant entered the courtroom with a cane in hand, his face somber, but still trying to remain composed. Outside, hundreds of reporters, activists, and even some of his accusers gathered, turning the courthouse into the nation's focal point. The key witness was Andrea Constand. She stood before the court and calmly recounted the painful memory of 2004. Cosby gave her several pills, telling her they would help her relax. Soon her body became paralyzed, and she lost control of everything. Her detailed, coherent testimony evoked the image of a powerful man exploiting trust to dominate. However, prosecutors faced major challenges. The long passage of time meant that physical evidence and direct witnesses were almost non-existent. Only Constand and one additional woman were allowed to testify to show a pattern of behavior. The defense attorneys seized on this gap, attacking Constand as unreliable, stressing that she had remained in contact with Cosby afterward and had even accepted gifts from him. After 6 tense days of trial and 6 days of jury deliberation, the outcome left many disappointed. The jury could not reach a unanimous verdict. Some wanted to convict, others felt there wasn't enough evidence. The judge declared a mistrial. Cosby temporarily walked free, leaving court with a faint smile. But the shadow of public opinion remained. Outrage erupted. Would another celebrity once again escape justice? Yet District Attorney Kevin Steele declared immediately, "We will retry. Justice does not end here." In April 2018, the second trial began. This time, prosecutors were far better prepared. The judge allowed 5 other women to testify, each recounting strikingly similar stories. Cosby invited them over, gave them alcohol or pills, then took advantage. Their testimonies, lined up one after another, painted a pattern of systematic abuse. Meanwhile, Cosby's defense team shifted strategies. They attempted to discredit Constand by presenting a former Temple University employee who claimed Constand once hinted she could make money by trapping a celebrity. But this strategy backfired, with jurors seeing it as an excessive attack on the victim. Unlike the first trial, the jury did not take long this time. On April 26, 2018, they declared Cosby guilty on all 3 serious charges. As the verdict was read, Cosby sat motionless, his face tense, eyes staring blankly. Outside, many of the women who had accused him embraced and cried, calling it a victory for the truth after decades. In September 2018, the judge sentenced Bill Cosby to 3 to 10 years in prison. He was also classified as a sexually violent predator, required to undergo lifelong treatment and permanently register as a sex offender. Handcuffed and escorted out of the courtroom, Cosby became the first major Hollywood star to fully fall in the Me Too era. That moment etched itself into public memory, a cultural icon who once brought laughter to millions, now led away as a criminal. The Cosby story became a global symbol that no one, not even the most powerful faces, stood above justice. The 2018 conviction was not just a personal downfall, but a cultural turning point for America. It came at the very height of the Me Too movement, when women worldwide were breaking their silence against abuse from powerful figures. Cosby, once America's dad, had now become the definitive example of America's predator. On talk shows, on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, the name Bill Cosby no longer evoked laughter, but outrage and social debate. Many believed this ruling would pave the way for a cascade of other Hollywood revelations, from Harvey Weinstein to Kevin Spacey. Cosby may have thought he would escape forever after the mistrial of 2017. But in 2018, the grip of the law closed tight, with no escape. He was convicted, imprisoned, and branded a predator. From that point on, the story of Bill Cosby was no longer just that of an entertainer, but a chapter in American history, about the fall of a legend and the rise of justice in a new era. In Prison and the Appeal, A Controversial Freedom, 2018-2021. On September 25, 2018, Bill Cosby, at the age of 81, was officially sent to SCI Phoenix Prison in Pennsylvania. That moment marked a historic turning point. The man who had once been America's beloved television icon, affectionately called America's dad by millions, now wore a prison uniform, carried a cane, and lived inside a cramped cell. Nearly blind Cosby could only faintly distinguish light from dark, forced to grope his way along the cold prison walls. There were no audiences, no applause, only the clinking of keys and the slam of steel doors closing behind him. Cosby's days in prison were a long stretch of isolation. Some fellow inmates nicknamed him the Old Man. At times, he still tried to maintain the air of a star, telling stories and even teaching life lessons to younger prisoners. But when it came to the mandatory rehabilitation program for sex offenders, Cosby flatly refused. He declared his innocence, saying he had nothing to repent for. Because of that, when his petition for clemency was submitted to the Pennsylvania Board of Pardons in 2021, it was rejected outright. Their reasoning, a man who does not admit guilt and refuses treatment cannot be pardoned. Meanwhile, outside the prison walls, Cosby's legal team fought relentlessly. After losing in appeals court, they escalated the case to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. The entire battle hinged on a detail long thought forgotten: the 2005 agreement between Cosby and prosecutor Bruce Castor. At that time, Castor had promised not to prosecute Cosby criminally in exchange for Cosby testifying in Andrea Constance's civil lawsuit. Those very depositions over 1,000 pages later returned as the weapon that led to Cosby's indictment and 2018 conviction. His lawyers argued that using those statements to prosecute him violated the core principles of justice, and that the state had broken the promise their client relied upon to testify truthfully. On June 30, 2021, a shock reverberated. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court overturned Cosby's conviction entirely. The reason his constitutional rights had been violated, as the 2005 non-prosecution agreement was binding and had to be honored. The court further ruled that Cosby could not be retried on the same charges. Within hours, the doors of SCI Phoenix opened, and the man who had been behind bars for nearly 3 years walked free. The image of Cosby raising his fist in triumph outside his home in Elkins Park, Pennsylvania, that very day became a symbol of deep controversy. His spokesperson called it a victory for justice. Cosby himself tweeted, "I have always maintained my innocence. Thank you, Lord. Thank you to all my supporters." But his joy was someone else's pain. Andrea Constance said she was shocked and deeply disappointed. Women's advocacy groups declared that the ruling could discourage other victims from coming forward. On social media, divisions erupted. Some celebrated, insisting Cosby was innocent, while others raged, calling it proof that the law still favors the wealthy and powerful. Though free, Cosby could not escape the verdict of public opinion. His image, even outside prison walls, remained tied to scandal, to dozens of accusations, to a tarnished legacy. Freedom did not mean innocence. It meant only a legal technicality, a loophole exploited. The name Bill Cosby, once synonymous with warm laughter in living rooms across America, was now inseparable from the haunting question: does justice truly serve everyone, or only those with the money and influence to outlast the system? In 2021, Bill Cosby walked out of prison, but he did not walk out from under the dark shadow that engulfed him. His freedom was a freedom of controversy, one that forced American society to look in the mirror and ask, when justice collides with power, which one prevails? The shadow that wouldn't fade. Civil lawsuits. 2022-2023. Bill Cosby walked out of SCI Phoenix prison on June 30th, 2021, his fist raised under the blinding glare of cameras. But that light was not the glow of glory, it was the harsh spotlight on a life forever stained. His freedom did not equal innocence. It was merely a legal loophole, a technicality his lawyers had successfully exploited. And as public anger still simmered, a new wave of turmoil surged, this time not criminal charges but civil lawsuits spanning across the United States. In June 2022, an old name returned to haunt Cosby: Judy Huth. She had first filed a lawsuit in 2014, but only when the case reached a California civil court did she prevail. Huth testified that in 1975, at just 15 years old, she was assaulted by Cosby at the Playboy Mansion. After more than 40 years, the jury believed her, ordering Cosby to pay $500,000 in damages. For many, it was proof that justice, though delayed, could still find its way. The verdict also set a precedent, encouraging other survivors to step forward. At the same time, several states enacted special look-back laws, reopening time windows for survivors to file civil suits regardless of how many decades had passed. In New York, the Adult Survivors Act allowed adult victims to file claims within a 1-year window beginning in November 2022. Immediately, a wave of women came forward. Among them was former supermodel Janice Dickinson, an icon of the 1980s who recounted being drugged by Cosby in the late 1980s. Alongside Dickinson, others, including an actress who once appeared on The Cosby Show, filed collective lawsuits. Not only in New York, but also in Nevada. Similar laws opened the door to new cases. In early 2023, 9 women sued Cosby describing the familiar pattern: invitations, drinks pills, broken memories, and lifelong trauma. In California, former Playboy model Victoria Valentino filed suit alleging she had been victimized by Cosby as far back as 1969. In New Jersey, actress Lily Bernard, who had appeared on The Cosby Show, claimed Cosby lured her to Atlantic City in 1990 and assaulted her. The list of accusations grew longer, stretching coast to coast. Each lawsuit was another cut, deepening the wounds in an image already in ruins. Now, in his mid-80s, Cosby denied everything. His spokesperson called them fabricated stories to extort money from a legend. But the public no longer listened. They had heard the pattern too many times before. And Cosby's troubles extended beyond lawsuits. Financial crises closed in. In December 2024, he and his wife Camille were sued for failing to repay a $4.2 million loan on their luxury Manhattan townhouse. In early 2025, an even greater threat arose. A court confirmed they risked losing another property worth tens of millions due to an unpaid $17.5 million loan, along with over $300,000 in tax debt. A man once worth an estimated $400 million now faced the prospect of financial ruin. Hollywood remained firmly shut. No television network dared rebroadcast The Cosby Show. Netflix and NBC, which had cut ties in 2014, never considered restoring anything. More than 20 universities upheld their decision to revoke his honorary degrees. In the eyes of the public, Cosby was no longer an artist, no longer a legend, but a national disgrace. Approaching 90, Cosby lived in near isolation. His talk of a stage comeback in 2023 never materialized. No contracts, no invitations, no audience. All that remained were courtrooms, lawyers, and mounting indictments. The shadow of the past never left him. Women who had once been silent out of fear now stood up. The law had shifted to give them a path. The internet never forgot. And Bill Cosby, though legally free, remained imprisoned by an invisible sentence, the judgment of public opinion, the weight of memory, and a legacy that could never be cleansed. A tainted legacy. The fall of a legend. Bill Cosby, a name once synonymous with laughter, warmth, and pride in American culture, is now forever tied to disgrace, endless lawsuits, and the image of a fallen icon. Looking back at his journey from the pinnacle of fame to the depths of scandal, one sees a steep, unrelenting decline from the brightest star on television to America's dad, from a respected philanthropist to a man shunned by society. In the 1980s, The Cosby Show was not just a hit series, but a cultural phenomenon. Running for 8 seasons, it became America's #1 sitcom for years, earning Cosby hundreds of millions of dollars and immense acclaim. He was one of the first black entertainers to break barriers in television, embodying the American dream of a happy, educated, respectable family. At his peak, Cosby's wealth was estimated at around $400 million. He owned properties in Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, California, and New York. More than 70 honorary degrees were bestowed upon him, and in 2002, he was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian honor. But all that glory was swept away in less than a decade. After 2014, the wave of accusations surged, and the Andrea Constant case moved Cosby from artist to defendant. In 2018, his 3 to 10-year prison sentence made him the first major star to be jailed in the Noward Me Too era. Though the conviction was later overturned, and though he walked free from prison in 2021, his image was permanently scarred. No producer dared collaborate with him. No university wanted to associate his name with an honorary degree. More than 20 titles were revoked. His multi-million-dollar TV advertising and project deals vanished without a trace. In his 80s, Cosby continued to drown in new civil suits. The Judy Huth verdict in 2022 forced him to pay $500,000, paving the way for a series of lawsuits in New York, Nevada, California, and New Jersey. Look-back laws turned the past into the present, leaving Cosby with no escape. His finances also spiraled. He faced losing his Manhattan townhouse over a $17.5 million loan, along with more than $300,000 in unpaid taxes. From a man who once amassed immense wealth, Cosby now faced the possibility of selling off assets to cover legal fees and settlements. But the greatest loss was not financial. It was his legacy. Today, when people hear Cosby's name, They no longer think of lighthearted sitcoms, educational speeches, or charitable donations to the Black community. Instead, his name is linked to the words scandal, allegations, and disgrace. The internet has cemented him as a symbol of betrayal, a living testament to the dark side of power in entertainment. Perhaps Cosby's downfall embodies the perfect tragedy. Of an era a man once considered a moral compass became a cautionary tale. He was cast as a father figure on television, the representation of the American family ideal. And it was precisely this role that made his collapse so devastating. The public did not just lose a celebrity idol, they lost faith in the values he had once symbolized. Today, as Cosby approaches 90, he lives in isolation, far from the spotlight, far from laughter. What remains is a heavy shadow stretching from past to present. His fall is not just the fall of an individual, but a warning to the entire entertainment industry. No one, no matter how powerful, can hide the truth forever. Bill Cosby's legacy, once dazzling like the lights of Hollywood, now remains only as a stain in the history of popular culture. And his story will forever be remembered not as the journey of a great star, but as one of the most devastating downfalls of a legend. The story of Bill Cosby serves as a reminder: fame may fade, but the truth never disappears. If you want to keep following in-depth analyses and insights into the shocking events that have shaken culture and global media, don't forget to like, share, to spread the message, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any new content.
All data, analysis, and commentary in this video are presented based on information available at the time of production. The content is subject to change over time and should not be considered a definitive forecast. There is still so much more to explore: stories of resilience, legacy, and truth. Feel free to dive into some of our top recommended videos now appearing on your screen.